Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders, make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Carrie Fox, who is the founder and CEO of Mission Partners, a woman-owned certified B Corp communications firm helping nonprofits, foundations, and purpose-driven companies grow their impact. She is the author of More Than Words and hosts the Mission Forward podcast focused on courageous, community-centered leadership. And she is also one of the impetuses for the creation of the Insights on Purpose Report 2026, which we are going to dive into a little bit today. But before all that, welcome, Carrie. It is such a pleasure to have you here. And would you just share a little more about yourself personally so we can get to know you?
Thanks, Sarah. It's so nice to be here with you and with your audience. So, for those who don't know much about me, I grew up in New Jersey and I have had a heart on my sleeve ever since I was a kid. My mom remembers when I was a kid, I would always be curious about why things were the certain way they were in the world. And I'd ask her question after question, trying to understand, particularly when things seemed unfair. And it's funny because that's the path my entire career has taken, is wanting to understand why the world is the way it is, why some things work some ways and others work others. So it's been my lifelong curiosity and really now my lifelong investment to work with nonprofits and foundations in helping them advance purpose-driven work in the world.
Yeah, I love that. So doing, the communications firm that you run, I'm certain that there was a moment where somebody came up with the idea, let's do this report. Can you tell me a little bit about how it came to life and why this became an important project?
I can tell you that moment is a great question because, Sarah, the work that I do, very similar to the work that you do, requires that I listen a lot, right? Back to that first question. I've listened most of my life, and that's how I learn. And I was listening and hearing some really important and, in some cases, concerning signals from nonprofits and from foundations, particularly from the CEO or the executive director. I've been hearing these signals coming out of COVID and coming into now this period of time with this new administration. So, really starting about a year ago, of organizational leaders saying, I just don't know if I can do it again. I don't know if I can navigate through another sustained crisis. Do I have what it takes? Can I keep this going? Can I keep my team where I need them? Can I keep the funding coming, even if I see some funding streams, tightening up? And so it was those questions. It started really with the signals that I was hearing. And so I said to my team, this is something we wanted to do for a long time. We listen anecdotally every day.
Yeah.
What would happen if we listened a quantitative way to organizational leaders all over the country and actually mapped what nonprofits are feeling against what foundations are feeling? What would that tell us? And so that was really the idea. It was the what if question of what if we listen deeper? And I brought the idea to the Chronicle of Philanthropy. They were really interested in this research. And so they decided to collaborate with us on it. They allowed us to use their full network to actually help to field the survey. And they've been a wonderful partner in helping to spread the news too.
Yeah, wonderful. Would you tell me a little more about the decision to kind of compare and contrast executive directors or nonprofits who are not foundations and foundations? Because I found the report
Yes.
definitely revealed some things.
Yes, yes. And some people said, there's a part of the report where we're looking at finances, and most folks have said, well, of course, aren't foundations going to be more comfortable with finances than nonprofits are? And yes, in some ways that's true. But again, it comes back to some of those signals. We were hearing, particularly when government funding was starting to shift, foundations were asking questions like, what if we just spent down entirely? What would that look like? And so we wanted to understand what's on your mind when it comes to finances, how you're spending and saving from the nonprofit side and the foundation side. And that's where that comparison came in. We wanted to ask questions about resilience. How are you feeling as a leader? We wanted to ask questions about finances, as I just noted. We wanted to ask questions about how you are living and leading through your values during this time. And then we wanted to ask questions about technology. What impact is AI or other technological systems having on where you are and where you're going? And what was really interesting is there's this fascinating duality in everything we heard, Sarah, that the vast majority of leaders we talked to, and this is over 400 leaders, 80% of them having the title of CEO or peer, that the vast majority of them feel optimistic about the moment that they're in. But when you start to press it a little bit, they say, well, I'm not actually sure I'm going to be able to navigate through the next 5 years doing what I've been doing. And so there's a reimagination mindset happening, which in a lot of ways is good, but it's also
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you share with us, especially from your perspective, what are the most notable things that came out of the research? Anything that surprised you or confirmed what you were thinking?
Yeah, strategy, I think, is a fascinating one, in part because a lot of the work that we do at Mission Partners is tied to strategy. But a quarter of all organizations are operating through this time without a strategic plan. So,
Mm.
very specifically, if you think about that, based on the research, 61% of nonprofits made a significant change to their funding strategy in the last year. 22% of foundations made a significant change to their grant making. So changes to strategy are happening, and yet a quarter of all organizations are actually operating without a plan.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating to me, right? We're
Yeah.
we're operating in this nimble environment. We're making the changes, but we're making the changes in many cases without knowing where we're going.
Yeah. I think I'm glad that you listed that one first as someone who's like very interested in strategy and teaches strategy. I can see that in my work. And I teach a strategic planning model where the staff leads strategy and we do strategic planning every 2 months. And I developed this 9 years ago, but it is even more relevant today. And I love that
Yeah.
data that came out because traditional strategic planning models, you can't do strategic planning fast enough to adapt to the changes, and yet I still feel like you are better off, especially if you have a team and are bringing a community along. You need strategy, I think, as an alignment tool. So I was really interested in that finding myself.
Yeah, sorry, you're speaking my language. I mean, this idea, one of the recommendations, we did all the research and then we came back with four recommendations. And one of them is to plan well, plan ahead, and plan often. Set aside the vision that you're going to build a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
You can still identify what you want your 10-year vision to be, but you may be planning in 1, 2, or 3-year increments, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and if I can add my little flavor on that, as someone who's like, I'm a real expert in iterative, rapid planning, is to even let go of the time frame. So you're in the model I teach, like we do planning every 2 months. That does not mean we make a 2 month plan. We have goals, and each goal has its own timeline.
Oh, no.
Some goals you're going to complete
No,
in
no.
2 months. Other goals might be, I had another interview with somebody who used to work for um, like a botanical garden, and they could set 100-year goals around trees they were planting, right? So I was like,
Mm.
this is such a good example, right? If you have a goal that naturally takes 100 years. So the timeline between which you do your planning does not have to be the timeline of your goals, and we
Yeah.
learn as we go.
Right, right, right. Our name as a firm is Mission Partners, and so we talk a lot about mission and the
Yeah.
importance that mission holds in having a foundational element of determining where you go, right? And it's not just mission, but mission, vision, values. And values was something we also asked in this
Yeah.
research is, do you feel like your values are under threat? Are they being threatened? Quite a few organizations said yes, at least one of my values has been publicly threatened. And through that, what we learned is that organizations are thinking about, how do I continue to advance this work in a way that is true and genuine, but maybe actually needs to be framed in a different way? And that's something that I'm sure you're seeing and have talked about on this show of, you can still do the work. You can still be true to the work. And it's okay to talk about the work in different ways, but you can be true to those values in the process.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that point up too, because I've seen that a lot. And really, those conversations about how do we not compromise ourselves, but also how do we not like take unnecessary risks that might really damage us and prevent us from doing the work at all. I know for me, in this podcast, I'm not subject to anybody's funding. So I have felt compelled to speak more about diversity and systemic biases and all the isms because I know that people are being silenced. And so it felt like my responsibility to elevate the conversation here to help balance out what folks are facing who have real funding cuts that could really eliminate programming to people.
Right, right. That's excellent. Someone said to me, and I literally have a post-it on my wall that says this is, be as innocent as sorry, now I can't see 'cause I'm too far away. Be as innocent as doves, but clever as foxes.
Yeah,
Like,
love
you can
that.
do the work, and
Yeah.
you can do the work a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also felt the same, when I developed my planning system. I mean, I truly believe that so much of what is good for treating people as whole human beings and eliminating biases and having diversity of input and thought and background is all good for running
It's all
nonprofits.
good.
Yeah,
It's all
it
good.
is so all good. So it's like you can get the medicine and you don't need to know that you're taking it.
Right,
And,
right.
if you care about it, I'd be happy to tell you about all the ways that the work I do is good in that way, but you also don't need to know because you come to me, to make your organizations run better, and that's what you need, and it all fits under that umbrella just as
Ugh,
well.
ugh. That's great.
So you mentioned 4 kind of key recommendation areas, and I'd love for you to share those, but I also wanna hear about, like, as it applies to your work directly, like, are you shifting things? Are you changing things? How are you taking these recommendations and using them?
We have always thought about Mission Partners as a firm that is in service of our community. And so our job is to meet our clients exactly where they are and to be ready and to pivot with them and to walk with them or navigate with them through those tough times. So we're not changing as much as what we recognize is we need to be even more nimble in these moments. So, breaking down certain services that we used to offer only in one way, well, then you can actually break those apart and do them in different ways. We're doing a lot more 1 day strategic planning instead of always doing the year long or 6 month process, right? Creating different ways for people to still have access to the services that they need. And similar to you, we have our agency side, Mission Partners, but we also have a free platform called Mission Forward, which is our podcast, and our books, and our resources that anyone can access. So if you are feeling struggled for time and resources, but you need a communications partner, well, we're going to give you access to free resources there. So that's been important. So so I can go to the recommendations, but I'm curious if there's anything else on that
Yeah,
first.
no, that's really helpful. So let's talk about the recommendations.
So I mentioned there's 4, and I already previewed one with you, but the first one came out because one of the findings was tied to this mismatch between nonprofits and foundations. And it's like we're talking over each other, right? That many nonprofits don't believe now foundations understand what they're going through. Many foundations believe nonprofits don't understand what they're going through. And so the first recommendation is to build collaboration for a new era of impact. Think about what would happen if you actually went from that misalignment to the alignment.
Mm.
Open up the doors wider to think about how you're communicating, how you're partnering, how you're pairing together, how you're engaging the community in meaningful ways, not as the final step in a process, but engaging that community through the process. So, building collaboration is going to be really important to navigate through this. The second one, we talked about values a few moments ago. Be bold by being consistent. Know
Right.
who you are, know what you stand for, and continue to navigate through those values. I think when we don't have the values and when we start to struggle on how we make key decisions, but be willing to navigate through those values.
Yeah. Go
The
ahead.
third one,
Yep.
plan well, plan ahead, plan often, right? We know a lot of people are trying to figure out how to navigate the uncertainty. There's always going to be uncertainty. There always has, there always will be, right? No one knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. So keep planning. Don't set that aside. And then the last one, and maybe we'll talk about AI for a moment, is learn and explore new technologies together. Nonprofits and foundations both agree that AI will be transformational in their work, but most organizations have been unwilling to invest in learning the technology or in putting even an ethical AI policy together to open the door to technology. And so, what we named that part of the research is it feels like we're moving toward the next digital divide if
Mm.
we don't close the gap in how foundations are investing at a much greater level than nonprofits are.
Yeah, I think that point is so interesting. And I really noticed that point in the report around not having a policy around AI or adapting new technology. And I'm not fearful of AI, but I am fearful that the nonprofit space will fall into an old habit of AI feels risky and we don't take risks, which is often actually more risky, and that they will be so afraid of the risks of AI that they won't adopt it, and then you'll
Right.
be really far behind. I'd love to hear your thoughts around that and what you would encourage nonprofit leaders to be thinking about.
I'm so glad you said that. So the data point, just to ground us there, is 57% of nonprofits and 55% of foundations report being behind the curve in AI. 74% of nonprofits and 75% of foundations agree that AI tools will help their organizations become more efficient. So it's this divide of we know it can help us, but we're not quite where we need to be. The more we've started talking to foundations and corporations about this, right, who are really on the leading edge, we have suggested that don't hold that information close. If you have the resources and you've been doing the research and you have a policy, share it.
Yeah.
Use this time to actually practice that commitment to transparency that you talk about and share it with your nonprofit grantees, share it with your nonprofit partners. Use that as a way to actually help close the gap because they don't have in many cases, the resources to be investing the way their counterparts can.
Yeah, I love that idea of foundations sharing those kinds of resources with their grantees. I think that's a great way to collaborate. I'm wondering, because that is such a striking gap, right? 55% or 50 to 55% of nonprofits and foundations feeling behind, and then such a large majority agreeing that like it's really important and we need it. I'm wondering in your work, how do you see your clients adopting AI well?
So this is one of those areas where we even see a digital divide. We see some who have completely moved in the direction of using AI as we have one client who's actually set up humanoids who are doing some of their front end fundraising for them. So that's on the far end. And then on the other end, we have people who say, as you said, I'm not going to touch it. It's ethically against who we want to be. We don't want to go in the direction, and we respect that too. We use opportunities to explain how it can still show up in responsible and ethical way.
Yeah.
And so it's a chance for us to model what our policy and pledge is, how we're navigating through it. We do regular workshops with our own team and we're building some of those policies collectively. And so we use that as an example to say, here's something that's been working for us, and it might be a model that works well for you too.
Yeah, I love that. You're making me think of I had an interview with an executive director, CEO of a nonprofit who has really embraced AI. And I just want to share that story again to inspire people. They fundraised and built an app. They do human services. They work helping return kids from orphanages to their families. And they have all these caseworkers who work with families abroad and in the US. And they did the work of fundraising and building an app with AI built in. Like, so we're talking all the HIPAA protections, all the things you might be afraid of. And AI is allowing their caseworkers to serve more families in a more meaningfully way. So go check out that episode. But I love that example because it's full of everything that people are scared of.
Yeah, yeah,
They get,
and that's just it, right? Like, AI, we define AI as augmented intelligence,
yeah,
not
I
artificial
love that.
intelligence, and
Yep.
that's what it should be, right? Our brains, we're not trying to replace our brains, we need those. That is core to who we are and how we connect with one another. But to have a tool that can augment how we research, how we understand, how we learn, can be supportive with those guardrails, and the
Yeah.
guardrails are essential, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have to be able to bring people along and understand how the technology can be used, how your information is being shared, understand all the limitations of the tools along the way. But I do think, if I think back to when I was first starting out, it was, the smartest person in the room gets ahead.
Mm,
Now it's like the person who most understands how to harness the tool is going to get ahead. So
yeah.
if we turn the tool off, we're going to miss out on opportunities to learn along the way.
Yeah. So true. I want to go back to around how nonprofits and foundations can be more on the same level, can collaborate more, because I bet you have some more thoughts about this. I have very much seen how I once was hired to be the first executive director of a corporately sponsored foundation. So I got to
Mm,
see, like, from the founding concept, being on that, having that other experience. And it was so revealing. And I think too many foundations get caught up in they don't wanna be, like, overburdened by people clamoring for money that doesn't align with their mission. And
right.
nonprofits are a bit too like, we need this." And I always wanna be like, you get the ones I describe, like, grant funding for nonprofits as the icing on the funding cake, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's a nice to have, it's not your essential core funding, and it's just like a nice augmentation, but it's not
Right.
the core thing. So,
Right.
how do you see, like, this potential I don't know, there's a divide there and getting rid of that divide.
Yeah.
Like, what are some ideas you have to
And
throw
it's
out
a
there?
tough thing because it is very much a power dynamic divide, and it
Yeah.
is hard to get rid of a power dynamic divide. I think about a there was an editorial cartoon in Stanford Social Innovation Review many years ago that I still think about. It was a nonprofit leader and a foundation leader, and the foundation leader said, "What's your mission?" And the nonprofit leader said, "Whatever you want it to be." Right? So I think first thing is we have to break, as you just said, right? Break that idea that we exist to get the money from our foundation. We exist
Yeah.
to win over the foundation. That it comes back to that be bold by being consistent. Know who you are, know what you do in the world and how you advance that better than anyone else, and own that and live it and move it forward. And what you'll find is people will start to line up to support that mission, right?
100%.
They're not
Yeah.
being sold to. They're wanting to follow and support. So that's important, right? The other piece I think from the foundation side is foundation can do many things to reduce that power dynamic in terms of what they ask in their grant applications. We work with an organization called Just Fund, which offers a common application. So, creating opportunities for nonprofits to do less work in the grant seeking process so they can do more of the work they need to do every day. Think about how much you are asking your nonprofits to do, and are there ways that you can streamline that process?
Yeah. I think those are all really important points. And I love that just highlighting it is a power dynamic. I think that's partly why I've been so like attracted to, when I was this executive director of the foundation, I came to realize, oh, foundations are nonprofits who choose to achieve their missions by
Mm.
basically hiring other nonprofits to do the work rather than choosing to do the work themselves. And I wish that then the nonprofits came around being like, I don't need your money, but I'm awesome at making your mission happen. So, if you really are nice to me, maybe I'll take your money and help you achieve your mission, right? To me, that's
Yeah.
like the conversation and the almost No, it's a much more equal power dynamic. Like you have money, I have the hands, right? Like
Right.
better
Right.
better pay well. Otherwise, I got lots of other people who want to help me
Yeah.
do this work.
And it's so funny you say that. Foundations are really nonprofits. We say that too. And we also say, and nonprofits are also businesses.
Yes.
And it's okay to think like a business and act like a business because you are. You're just a different type of business.
Yeah.
So remembering that, right, again, starts to shift that power dynamics.
Yeah, I love that. And that you have something that the foundation needs desperately, because a
Correct.
foundation that is not achieving a mission is in trouble.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And and being able to understand that at some point, and certainly through moments of great change like this, that not all nonprofits will survive. And sometimes that's okay too, right? That sometimes the combining of forces, the realigning of forces, the resetting of missions, all of that is good if it's truly in service of a mission and not about how do I protect my job or my role.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because, nonprofits, like you said, they are businesses. Businesses are not humans. They don't have to live on. I'll never forget to a nonprofit I spoke to. They were in trouble. They were a couple months away from completely dissolving everything. And they said, well, we can't work with you because we have to save enough money to keep the lights on in our office. I'm like, you're about to go over under, right? Like,
Mm.
forget the electric bill. Let's like kickstart your funding so you don't go out of business. They chose their electric bill and went out of business a couple months later,
Mm.
unfortunately. But
Mm.
we have this grip on like we can't risk it, but you can. It is just it is a business. I don't want to say just because that's like too diminishing, but the work can live on in another business, in another nonprofit, like paired with an organization. And if your nonprofit needs to be a unique entity, there are going to be people who are going to support that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. And it's okay to reimagine along the way how you do it, how you get the work done.
Yeah. Totally. Well, we are pretty much at time already. I've had such a good chat with you. So much fun. I'm wondering if you can share like those people who want to learn more. Of course, we'll have the report link in the show notes. But what kind of folks, are great fits to work with you and mission partners? And what's the best way for people to reach out?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So you mentioned the report. The easiest place to find the report is insightsonpurpose.us. The whole report is there. You can download it and access, you can explore it. So insightsonpurpose.us. If you are a nonprofit leader, a board member, anyone who's working inside this purpose driven field, and you're looking for some of those free resources I mentioned, go to missionforward.us. You'll see anything you can download, access, take advantage of, learn from our learning community. What's ours is yours. And if you need a partner along the way, then you can head to mission.partners.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you out there for listening and everything you do to make our communities better. And until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.